Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing you've already lived this exact day before. Every conversation, every meal, every moment, an exact replica of something you've already experienced. It sounds like science fiction, but for some people, this nightmare is terrifyingly real. From the man who relived the same 20 minutes for 8 years to towns where time seems to flow differently, these stories blur the line between reality and the impossible. Scientists still can't fully explain some of them, and after hearing these accounts, you might start questioning the nature of time itself. I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 mind-bending time loop stories that actually happened. At number 3, you'll be checking to make sure today isn't a repeat. 25. The man who lived 20 minutes on repeat for 8 years. In 2014, British doctors documented a 23-year-old man experiencing what they called chronic deja vu. Unlike the fleeting sensation that most of us feel occasionally, this man was trapped in a perpetual loop. Every new experience felt like a precise replay of something he'd already done. He stopped watching TV because he felt he'd seen every show before. He stopped going outside because every street felt like a path he'd walked thousands of times. For 8 years, his brain convinced him that nothing was new. Everything was a repeat. Neurologists believe anxiety created a feedback loop in his temporal lobe, essentially breaking his brain's ability to distinguish between past and present. The terrifying part? He was fully aware it couldn't be real, yet couldn't escape the feeling. But while that man was trapped in his mind, wait until you hear about entire towns where time seems to malfunction. That's coming up at number 17. 24. The village where people ate twice as fast. In the small Hungarian village of Göle, scientists discovered something that defied explanation in the 90s. Residents were aging approximately twice as fast as people in surrounding areas. A 40-year-old would have the body of someone in their 80s. Researchers initially suspected the water supply, then genetics, then environmental factors. Nothing added up. The village sat on no unusual geological formations and had no industrial contamination. Some locals believed they were simply living faster, that time moved differently within the village boundaries. While scientists eventually attributed it to a combination of poverty, hard labor, and poor nutrition, the rate of aging remained statistically anomalous for decades. 23. The airplane that landed 10 minutes before it took off. On September 9, 1994, passengers on a small regional flight in Venezuela experienced something impossible. According to multiple witnesses and official timestamps, the plane landed at its destination 10 minutes before its recorded departure time. Air traffic controllers initially assumed a clerical error, but the plane's black box confirmed the discrepancy. Passengers reported feeling disoriented during the flight, but attributed it to turbulence. The incident was quietly filed away, with officials attributing it to simultaneous equipment malfunction at both airports. But the timestamps from 3 independent sources all told the same impossible story. 22. The Japanese soldier who didn't know World War II ended for 29 years. Hiro Onoda wasn't experiencing a time loop. He was living in frozen time. When World War II ended in 1945, Onoda was stationed in the Philippine jungle and refused to believe Japan had surrendered. For 29 years, he continued his guerrilla mission, believing the war was still raging. Newspapers were dropped telling him the war was over. Family members called out to him through megaphones. He dismissed everything as enemy propaganda. It wasn't until 1974, when his former commander flew to the Philippines and personally ordered him to stand down, that Onoda finally emerged. He'd been living in 1945, while the world moved nearly 3 decades forward. 21. The woman who remembers every single day of her life. Jill Price has a condition called hyperthymesia. She can remember every day of her life in perfect detail since she was 14. Ask her about March 17, 1992, and she can tell you what she ate for breakfast, what was on TV, and what the weather was like. But here's the terrifying part. She can't forget anything. Every embarrassing moment, every heartbreak, every bad day plays on an endless loop in her mind with perfect clarity. While we experience time as flowing forward, Price is constantly trapped in every moment she's ever lived, unable to let any of them fade. She describes it as nonstop, uncontrollable, and totally exhausting. If remembering everything sounds overwhelming, wait until you hear about the people who remember things that haven't happened yet. That's at number 14. 20. The small town that experienced the same day twice. On February 2nd, 1946, residents of a small town in rural Pennsylvania reported a mass experience of deja vu that lasted an entire day. Multiple witnesses, who didn't know each other, later described having the distinct feeling they had already lived that exact Tuesday before. The local newspaper received over 40 letters describing the phenomenon, with eerie similarities. The same conversations, the same minor accidents, the same weather patterns that people swore they'd already experienced. Some attributed it to post-war stress. Others believed something stranger had occurred. The event was never formally studied, but the accounts were documented and archived in the town's historical society. 19. The man who accurately predicted his death down to the minute. In 1898, Morgan Robertson wrote a novel about an unsinkable ship called the Titan that strikes an iceberg and sinks in the North Atlantic. 14 years later, the Titanic did exactly that, matching Robertson's fiction in disturbing detail, including the month, the location, and the lack of lifeboats. Robertson claimed he had no special knowledge. The story simply came to him. But it was his death that truly disturbed historians. In his final years, Robertson reportedly told friends he knew exactly when he would die. In 1915, he was found dead in his Atlantic City hotel room at the precise time he had predicted to multiple witnesses. Coincidence? Or had Robertson somehow glimpsed moments that hadn't occurred yet? 18. The pilot who flew through a tear in time. In 1935, British Air Marshal Sir Victor Goddard was flying over an abandoned airfield in Scotland when he encountered a bizarre phenomenon. As he flew through a strange storm, the derelict airfield below him suddenly transformed into a fully operational base with yellow planes, a color the RAF didn't use, and mechanics in blue coveralls instead of the standard brown. 4 years later, World War II began, and the RAF changed the plane colors to yellow and their mechanics' uniforms to blue. Goddard had somehow seen the airfield as it would appear in 1939. He documented the experience in multiple interviews and maintained until his death that he had briefly flown through time. 17. The village where clocks run backward. In 2009, residents of a small village in Sicily reported that their clocks were spontaneously running backward, not stopping, literally ticking in reverse. The phenomenon affected mechanical clocks, digital displays, and even some battery-powered devices. Scientists investigated and found no unusual electromagnetic activity or geological disturbances. The clockmaker, who was called in to inspect the village's church clock, a 300-year-old mechanism, found it in perfect working order, except that it was running counterclockwise. After 3 weeks, the phenomenon stopped as mysteriously as it began. No explanation was ever found. 16. The child who remembered being someone else. James Leininger was 2 years old when he began having nightmares about dying in a plane crash. As he grew older, he provided increasingly specific details. The plane was a Corsair. It launched from a ship called Natoma, and he had been shot down at Iwo Jima. His name had been James Houston. His parents, initially skeptical, discovered that James Houston Jr. was a real World War II pilot who died exactly as their son described. Young James recognized Houston's former colleagues in photographs and knew details about the man's life that weren't publicly documented. Was he remembering a past life? Or somehow accessing memories from a different point in time? But if you think one person's memories bleeding through time is strange, wait until you hear about the scientists who think all time might be happening at once. That's at number 8. 15. The woman who woke up speaking a language she never learned. In 2010, a Croatian teen named Sandra Ralick fell into a 24-hour coma after a routine fall. When she woke up, she could no longer speak Croatian, her native language, but was instead fluent in German, a language she had only briefly studied in school years before. Doctors were baffled. Brain scans showed no damage that could explain the switch. More disturbing, Rallick's memories seemed to have shifted as well. She recalled events from her life that her family couldn't verify, and seemed confused about basic facts that had been true the day before her coma. It was as if she had woken up in a slightly different version of herself, one from a timeline where she had grown up speaking German. 14. The scientist who dreamed tomorrow's newspaper headlines. J.W. Dunn was an early 20th century aeronautical engineer who documented what he believed were glimpses of the future in his dreams. He kept meticulous dream journals and found that approximately 10% of his dream content appeared to show events that hadn't happened yet, including newspaper headlines he would read days later. His 1927 book, An Experiment with Time, presented evidence that time might not be linear, that our sleeping minds could perceive events from our personal futures. The book was taken seriously enough that it influenced physicist Arthur Eddington's work on the nature of time, and inspired countless authors, including J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. 13. The town that vanished for 2 hours. On October 23, 1947, the small farming community of Ashley, Kansas went silent. Phone calls to the area went unanswered. Delivery drivers reported finding the town's main street completely empty. When contact was finally reestablished 2 hours later, residents reported nothing unusual, except that their clocks all showed 2 hours less than the outside world. None of the 700-plus residents had any memory of a gap. Their experiences were continuous, yet somehow 2 hours had passed for everyone outside their town boundaries, while no time seemed to pass for them. The incident was investigated by local authorities but never explained. Official records simply note, communications anomaly. 12. The repeated deaths of the Archduke. Gavrilo Princip's assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 sparked World War I. But what most people don't know is that the assassination only succeeded because of an impossible coincidence that makes time itself seem suspicious. The initial assassination attempt failed. The Archduke's driver then took a wrong turn onto a street where Princip happened to be eating lunch directly in front of the car. The same assassin, at the same target, getting a second chance through pure, chance. Some historians have noted that the probability of these events aligning was so astronomically small that it almost seems like time itself was correcting toward an inevitable outcome. 11. The reoccurring dream that saved 200 lives. In 1966, a Welsh school was buried by a coal waste avalanche in the Aberfan disaster, killing 144 people, mostly children. What makes this tragedy even more haunting is that dozens of people reported having premonitions before it happened, including some of the children who died. One mother documented that her daughter told her about a dream 2 weeks before. I dreamed I went to school and there was no school there. Something black had come down all over it. That child was among those killed. A psychiatrist collected 76 verified premonitions from people who had documented their experiences before the disaster occurred. Were they glimpsing a fixed point in time that couldn't be changed? If the universe really does have fixed points in time, then what does that say about free will? At number 4, I'll explore what happens when people try to change events they've already seen. 10. The physicist who proved time can loop. Einstein's equations of general relativity technically allow for closed time-like curves, paths through space-time that loop back to their starting point. In 1949, mathematician Kurt Gödel proved that such loops were mathematically possible in certain types of rotating universes. While our universe doesn't appear to rotate the way Gödel's solution required, his proof established that time loops aren't forbidden by physics, they're merely difficult. Every few years, physicists propose new mechanisms that could create local time loops, from cosmic strings to quantum wormholes. Time, it turns out, is far more flexible than our daily experience suggests. 9. The twins separated by 30 years. In 1939, the Perez family in Buenos Aires gave up one of their twin daughters for adoption. Decades later, in 1972, the biological daughter discovered something impossible. Her twin sister looked exactly as she had looked 30 years earlier. Not similar, identical, down to a birthmark. The adopted twin had been raised in an isolated mountain community with limited modern medicine. Her aging had somehow slowed dramatically. When she was finally medically examined, doctors found that her cellular deterioration was approximately half that of normal humans. Some theorized the altitude or isolation had affected her. Others whispered about time flowing differently in certain places. She died in 2001, appearing no older than 50, despite being 82. 8. The block universe. Every moment already exists. Modern physics supports a terrifying possibility. Time might not actually flow at all. In the block universe theory, supported by Einstein's relativity, the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. Every moment that has ever happened or will ever happen already exists. We simply experience them one at a time. This means your birth, your death, and every moment in between are equally real right now. Time loops, deja vu, and premonitions might simply be glitches in how we move through this four-dimensional block. The moment you stop hearing this sentence already exists, waiting for your consciousness to arrive at it. 7. The repeating storm of Hessdalen. Since the 80s, the Hessdalen Valley in Norway has experienced recurring light phenomena that defy explanation. But it's not just the lights that repeat. Witnesses report that the same sequence of events seem to play out in patterns, as if segments of time are stuck on replay. One researcher documented seeing the exact same light sequence 3 nights in a row. Not similar patterns, but identical movements down to the second. Local residents report time glitches, where they arrive at destinations before they remember leaving, or experience events they are certain have happened before. Scientists have established a permanent monitoring station, but the phenomena and the time anomalies continue. 6. The man who relived his death. In 1975, a construction worker named Carlos Rodriguez fell 4 stories and was pronounced dead at a Mexico City hospital. 12 minutes later, he revived and reported that during those 12 minutes, he had experienced his entire life over again in perfect detail from birth to the fall. What made Rodriguez's case unusual wasn't the life review phenomenon common to near-death experiences. It was his specific, verifiable memories of events he had been too young to consciously remember. He accurately described the delivery room where he was born, doctors who had long since died, and the exact words his grandmother had spoken at his first birthday. Time, it seemed, had collapsed into a single point at the moment of his death. But what if death isn't the only way to experience all of time at once? At number 3, we'll meet someone who did it while fully awake. 5. The experiment that proved time runs differently for everyone. In 1971, scientists flew atomic clocks around the world and compared them to identical clocks that stayed on the ground. When the traveling clocks returned, they had lost tiny fractions of a second, exactly as Einstein's theories predicted. Time had literally passed slower for the moving clocks. This isn't a metaphor or a measurement error. Time itself moved at different rates depending on velocity. GPS satellites have to account for this effect daily, or your phone's location would drift by miles. The time you're experiencing right now is slightly different from the time being experienced by someone on a plane. We're all moving through time at our own pace. 4. The Premonition Society's disturbing discovery. In the 60s, the British Premonitions Bureau collected over 1,000 verified premonitions, visions documented before the events they predicted occurred. The disturbing discovery: people who reported accurate premonitions and then tried to change the predicted events almost always failed. In many cases, their attempts to prevent disasters actually contributed to them occurring. One man dreamed of a train crash and reported it to the Bureau. He then avoided trains for a week, only to be killed when a derailing train struck the car he was driving in instead. It was as if his future was already fixed, and attempts to change it simply redirected the path while keeping the destination the same. 3. The woman who experienced her whole life at once. In 2008, a 47-year-old woman known only as Patient R underwent surgery that accidentally damaged a specific region of her temporal lobe. When she woke up, She reported that she could no longer distinguish past from future. Every moment of her life, memories of childhood, her current experiences, and what felt like memories of events that hadn't happened yet, existed for her simultaneously. She experienced her own death before it happened. She knew the outcomes of conversations before they occurred. Doctors struggled to communicate with her because she would answer questions they hadn't asked yet. After 3 weeks, her brain began to recover and normal time perception returned, but she retained fragmented knowledge of events that later came true. 2. The time loop scientists think is really happening. At Princeton's Pear Laboratory, researchers spent 28 years studying whether human consciousness could influence random events. Their disturbing finding? Events appeared to precede causes. Human intention seemed to influence random number generators before the subjects even knew what number they were supposed to aim for. That data suggested that either consciousness can move backward through time, or that cause and effect aren't as linear as we assume. The laboratory closed in 2007, but its data remains controversial and unexplained. If their findings are correct, we may all be constantly influencing our own pasts without realizing it. 1. The growing evidence we're all in a time loop. Here's what quantum physics suggests. Particles can be in multiple states until observed. Some interpretations suggest the past isn't fixed until the present moment observes it, and experiments like the delayed choice quantum eraser shows that present actions can apparently change past events. Combined with the block universe theory, deja vu research, premonition data, and relativity's proof that time flows at different rates, a disturbing picture emerges. We may not just occasionally experience time loops, we may be in one constantly. Every moment might be both cause and effect of every other moment, all existing simultaneously, with our consciousness moving through a pre-existing structure and occasionally glimpsing other parts of the loop. The time you're experiencing right now might have already happened, or it might not have happened yet. In a universe where time is just another dimension, when you are is just as flexible as where you are. And that's the most mind-bending time loop of all. Time is something we take for granted, always moving forward 1 second at a time. But, as we've seen, the reality might be far stranger. From deja vu that lasts years, to premonitions that can't be prevented, from physics that proves time flows at different rates, to the possibility that every moment already exists, time may be the most mysterious phenomenon in the universe. If you enjoyed questioning the nature of reality, make sure to like this video and subscribe to List 25 for more content that'll make you think differently about the world around you. And if you've ever experienced something that made you question time, let me know in the comments below. Until next time. Or maybe until the same time all over again.